Hello everybody, my name is Todd. I'm bringing this to you in illustrious World Star Vision. I have some pieces of artwork I'm working on. I have another one I finished recently. Let me just grab this one real quick. Actually, I just have the two in here right now, I think. I don't think I brought the third one in. The third one's in the car. Okay. So I've been working on my artwork a lot. Anybody that has seen my videos, obviously, my recent stuff I've put up on Facebook, and I'll occasionally get questions from, I have lots of my friends on Facebook are artists or writers, or they're just in the creative field in general. But those of you who are not artists or writers or, imaginative, creative people yet, but you'd like to get into it. A lot of times people will ask, I got something weird at Target, I'll grab this. I'll use this as a reference here in a minute. Let me just move this over here though. They'll ask, like, what would you recommend for someone who's an artist who's trying to, develop their skills? First is very important. Most traditional arts teachers, I'm not a teacher obviously, I don't have a degree in art, but most teachers would probably insist that you learn the tools of the trade part of it. So I'm going to bring out a couple of examples here. I've got regular pens, and then I've got ink wash pens, and I've got a Sharpie, I've got a couple different kinds of drafting pencils, and an eraser. So pencils. The type of pencil you use determines the level of detail you can put into your artwork. The type of lead you use also aids in that, as well as determines the thickness and the smearability of the kind of lines that you produce. For instance, these are two different kinds of draftsman pencils. One is a 0.3 Pentel Graphic Gear 500, that's this one. This is the one I use the most. This is the thinnest lead you can generally get speaking in the United States. It's very fine detail. I'll show you a piece. All my artwork you're going to see are choked with detail. And this is a slightly bigger one. It's a 0.5 millimeter. What's the name of the company? I can't see. Arvin. I'm guessing Arvin Draftmatic. It's this one. This is slightly thicker line weight. I'll generally start at the darkest pencil lead I'll use is a 2H. The 2H is the second, and it's actually the first kind of pencil lead you'll get that is lighter colored. It's more lead or more graphite than lead. And the H, it just means hardness. The B means bold, essentially. So B would be like your standard Ticonderoga number 2 pencil. That would be considered a 2B pencil. And if you recall writing it, if you're a righty, it wouldn't bother you that much. But if you're a lefty and you'd have to write, your hands would just smear the pencil lead all over the place. It just looks like this wet smudge. So I generally use the H leads. I would prefer 3H, 4H, or that's about the highest you can get, where it's just basically such a light gray line that you have to go over it several times to make sure it pops up more. Okay, so that's pencils. Pens, they're the kind of inking pens I use for my artwork are Sakura Pigma Micron pens. These are just 3 various sizes. The ink will sometimes smear off. Also, depending on the size, I've noticed this only really happens with 01s. This part right here will start weeping fucking lead for no reason, or ink for no reason. It just does that all the time. So if you buy this product, that's one thing to be aware of. Don't just do this with these pens. If you have your artwork underneath you, and you pull this open and there's a bunch of pooled up ink, it's going to splatter all over anything working underneath you. I've avoided that because I open my pens away from my art so I can get a look at it like, okay, that's fine. But I generally check them before I use them because you never know. and you really can't afford to do a permanent screw up unless you're that kind of artist and you can make that shit work. I know Bill Sienkiewicz and like what's the guy that draws women's asses all the time? Mark Beecham. Yeah, that guy. They had a lot of like splatter in like the 80s and early 90s. They had a lot of like incorporated a lot of brush painting techniques. Mark Beecham, I believe, drew the Saint-Marie comic book for Continuity. You could tell it was his art because all the chicks were bent over and they were like wearing leather outfits. Okay, so these are ink wash pens. They have acid in them, as far as I know. These are acid-free archival ink, so they will stay black. They're not going to fade. Well, they'll run but it's hard to make something like this run. These aren't going to run either. When these go over, they're good for adding some color, depending on, because there's different gradients. These are Spectrum Noir. One end is more like a standard brush tip felt pen. And wow, this one is dry. Oof. Well, it's still pungent smelling, but it feels dry. Oh, these have dried out, it seems. God damn it, that was like $30 worth of pens. You got to make sure you keep up on the health of your, like I said, these are tools. Don't get too hung up on it. This is a basic Sharpie. I don't use this shit. I know a lot of people do. The reason I don't is they bleed through pages. They look more purple than black, and they're unprofessional as fuck. That's just me. I've seen incredible artists do incredible art with one of these. So I know it's not the tool that's the problem. It's just I don't like using stuff like this because it's sloppy, it's chunky, and I don't like doing drawings where I'm just leaving it to chance. I like to be a bit more of a control freak with how my artwork is laid out. And the other one's just a basic eraser. This is a Staedtler eraser, Staedtler. It's a standard. They sell these everywhere, and these are really good. There's another specific one. I forget what the model of it, the name of the company is, but it's one that Adam Hughes uses, and he goes, "This is the nuclear option," like because of the style of artwork he does. He wants to make sure it gets down to the paper and erases any evidence that there was any line work. Because I used H leads. It scores the page. It literally makes a mark. It's not just I'm brushing pencil lead over it. Which you get with the B's is you can get more of a. It's great for gestural kind of artwork. Like most arts teachers will beat you about the head and neck, insisting that everyone draws like this. No one draws like this. The people that draw like this are in your class. This is. Learning to use your whole arm to get a range of motion, that is a great thing to learn. It will help save you carpal tunnel issues with your wrist, a variety of different arthritic conditions that can happen with your knuckles from like putting too much pressure on your fingertip. I've done that to myself. Also, it'll help you with tendinitis, because once you feel this specific part of your arm right here, this where all these tendons and everything come together, once this area starts to fray or starts to be affected in a negative way from repeated use, it will then affect your ability to feel your fingers. So another thing, the most important tool to take care of, besides your art supplies and making sure everything's functioning, make sure you have enough lead, make sure you have the right kind of pencil erasers and all the stuff that you need to also make sure that you stretch. And I know a lot of people think this shit is me making a joke. I'm not joking. I've had tendinitis from a manual, well, it was a manual labor job. It was where I was a warehouse manager for Cost Plus. It damaged my forearm so badly that the pain would radiate up my arm into my jaw, making me feel like my teeth were literally rotting out of my skull. It was one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. It lasted for 6 months. And that's with physical therapy. And then the other part was it would come shooting down and radiate at this point in between my knuckles. Like it felt like someone stabbed me through my hand. And that doesn't include your entire arm going numb. So you know, pay attention to yourself. Take care of yourself. Make sure that you're hydrated. A lot of the problems can be mitigated by mild stretching. Like my stretches I learned are this kind of similar ones I did in the martial arts. It's just to make sure if you're going to do like Aikido or some of like joint manipulation or Chin Na in Chinese martial arts, you need to make sure that you stretch. And not just this and the other one, this one, but also across your shoulder. And I always do where you rotate your arm like this, but you put it flat against your chest, and you can kind of prop it up against your thigh, and you can feel all the tendons behind in the back of your shoulder and also up here. They bunch up, and you may not notice it until you actually go to stretch it, and then you'll realize like, there was just like this weird kink in your shoulder that you didn't feel before. Try to make sure you stretch before you work on your artwork is all I'm saying. Not all the time. It's not, you're not going to a work camp. No one's going to tell you drop and give me 20. But just your overall health. These are the main tools you're going to use in terms of creating something physically. However, the tools in your hands are only a small portion of being an artist. Being an artist is something that is, for certain people, it is more of an inherent skill set. You're kind of like any other person that has a physical ability that's natural beyond the average person. You get a little bit of a boost. But this is what they used to use in terms of stand-up. I think I forget who the comic this phrase is attributed to. You can be the most famous person on earth, but when you get out on stage, people will only clap for about 5 minutes, and then they're going to stop clapping because of how famous you are. At some point, you have to do your job and be funny if you're on stage. Art is the same way. You need to try to make sure that you stay in a mindset where you're willing to learn, or failing that, at least admit when you don't know things. That will save you a lot of time and difficulty in developing specific techniques. There are a lot of things I willfully decided to not learn when I was younger, and they came back and bit me in the ass pretty hard. So I recommend, and even with the fact that I've been drawing since I was 4, with the minus of the 2 years I was in the military, I've pretty much been drawing my entire life. However, I've known people that have done art in a similar style as mine, who've been doing it for 5 years, who are better than me. But they're younger. Don't worry, it's just vodka. Anyway, the only problem is when you're younger, you get access to more, I guess you could describe as creatively exploitative programs that make it slightly easier for you to present what's in your mind in a digital medium. The problem is you're not really creating anything. When you use a computer program, you're using the program in obviously the way it's intended. However, and this is something when I was going to Academy of Arts, a lot of the professors used to tell me, I came in with like a portfolio full of finished art, pencil, line art, and they would all look through it, and they're just like, well, it seems like you have all the skills you need. Why do you want to come here? And one of the younger guys, he used to work for Weta Workshop in New Zealand for movies, and doing digital animation. And he would look at my stuff, and he's just like, you know how hard it is to find an artist of today's generation of kids? And he was only maybe like 10, 15 years older than the average high school graduate. Like, he's only a guy in his mid to late 20s. And he goes, none of them know how to draw with a pencil. None of them. You give them a pad, a pencil pad, or a pad and a pencil, and they're fucking lost. And he was just like pointing to my artwork. He's like, don't stop doing this. This makes you more experienced than 90% of them, even if they can produce better finished art than you. You already start off with the basics of actual art training, which is physical pens, physical pencils, paper, charcoals, or whatever medium you're going to use, canvases, oils. It doesn't really matter. You have to fail over and over and over and over again. Otherwise, and you have to be willing to accept that you failed at something. You're not going to improve at anything if you think you're hot shit. So if you want to come in and be an artist, that's great. But you need to be able to learn. And you don't need to act like you don't know what you're doing. I'm not telling people they need to have some faux incompetence that they're kind of trying to make themselves feel better about. But just think, you know, being an artist isn't easy. It isn't an easy thing to be. It's easy to actually do the art, but it's not easy to do it for a living, unless your stuff is in a particular trade and it just works for you. There's a lot of people who are extremely successful artists I know. The one thing that they all have in common is they all work their asses off. They work their asses off. To do it for a living, you don't get days off as an artist. You don't. Even if you work, like I'm at work right now. I still work on my artwork. I get to do it 2 days a week. I get to do this. So these are 2 days where if I'm not too busy, I can actually spend 10 or more hours in 2 days while I'm being paid to draw whatever the fuck I want and do whatever I want with my life. That to me makes the 1.5 years of backbreaking labor I had to put up with to get to this point, it validates it for me. And I know there are a lot of people who are younger who have much higher expectations. That shit'll change. You know, once you come in contact with reality and you realize that reality doesn't give a shit about your plans, I know that sounds like a real, like, something you'll see on a fucking coffee mug, but it's true. Everybody on the planet had plans to do something else with their life, and yet they're not doing it. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they're stupid? Because they're lazy? Because they weren't as smart as you? You're no smarter, no more talented than millions of other people all over the world. If you become successful, a lot of it comes down to chance. It's not about hard work. It's not about effort. If you want to be recognized as a great artist, you don't need to be successful. You just need to produce great art. Art is entirely a show and prove medium. I've had this conversation a million times where someone goes, you know, you show them a piece of your artwork, they're like, oh, you're an artist. Yeah, well, obviously, look at the fucking art. And they'll go, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I work on art too. Like, really, like, you have like a website, or do you have any, like, on your phone, like, any, like, images or anything I can look at? Because, you know, it's always nice to see new stuff from people. You get all kinds of cool shit. And they go, well, I'm not that kind of artist. Well, then you're not a fucking artist, bullshit artist. That's the only kind of artist you are. I mean, if you want to try to convince... I mean, for me, it's like when someone comes up to you telling you that they're a military veteran, but they don't know what a fucking DD-214 is. It's shit like that. If you want to be a fake fuck, go do that somewhere else. There's plenty of losers and fake people that want to pretend that they've done something they haven't. There's tons of them. They're everywhere. Like, I remember I was in Visalia. Great example. I was in Visalia with my cousin. We were at this bar. It was kind of this, like, little corner bar. It looked like a fucking, like a old burger place, but they just converted it into a bar. So it's kind of like open space. People are walking around. And I got to listen to this dude that was maybe at the time in his late 50s, early 60s. And he did the word for... He's talking about how he was a Vietnam-era veteran. And I'm like, okay, so I'm listening to him. I listened to him do a word-for-word reenactment of the Woe Is Me speech that Rambo gives in the first Rambo film. And I was sitting next to my cousin, Matt, and I went, did you hear that guy? And he goes, no, what'd he say? And I just start telling him exactly what the guy says, and my cousin's like, it sounds really familiar. And I'm like, it's from fucking Rambo. This guy's trying to get ass, pretending he played a character role in a fucking, in a fucking Sylvester Stallone movie. Got better luck pretending to be Judge Dredd. That wasn't intended to be funny. Let me just check this. That's not mine. That's not mine. This one's mine. Okay. These are just my receipts. I got to keep track of them. But anyway, let me clock back in real quick. The important thing about being an artist to me is not necessarily get a good teacher. You can be a great artist without having any classes, but I would recommend finding someone who's an artist who can be a mentor, not necessarily a teacher. It's very good to be, and this is a weird thing to say, being a kind of introverted, I don't like being around dealing with people. I just don't. I mean, I have a job where I deal with people for a living, but I can deal with people for a job. In my personal life, I'd rather sit in my car minding my business or anywhere minding my business, not having anyone talk to me. I mean, when I was younger, I'd probably be more social, but as I get older, I just don't care. I'm in my 40s, like, so, you know, what are you going to do? But this weird part of being an artist is that so much of it is entirely isolated and alone. And you have to be fine with being by yourself. And, however, there's a special thing that comes from getting a group of people who may not even do the same kind of artwork, but getting them all working on artwork in the same room. There is a kind of beautiful, unspoken hive mind of creativity that happens when you get very creative people together. This is not me advocating for you living on a crazy commune and making artwork with macaroni and a lot of glue and a shitload of mushrooms. I'm not recommending that. I'm saying that you can get a bunch of like-minded people. Even running these people at school, just find people that are you'll just see people sitting around drawing, working on their artwork, waiting for classes. You can go up and talk to them, even if you're not social, or just draw next to them. You don't have to talk. Just go draw next to someone who's already drawing. You'll find that you will pick up so many little tips from watching someone's technique of doing something. You're like, I like how their eyes turn out. They're looking really solid. They look more realistic than mine. How do they do that? And you'll try to replicate it yourself, and you'll start to realize, oh, this person clearly focused on doing their arches, and they really worked on it to where it looks natural, or more natural than what you're doing. But it's, you know, you pick things up from people. People that give a shit about what they do radiate a level of energy that fosters a level of enthusiasm, which is what you need. And if it's not to say that that's all you should do to solve your problems and your little speed bumps you come along with in your artwork, but it is something to be good to be aware of. Now, I have my two pieces of artwork here. One I'm not really that close to finishing, and the other one I'm also not really that close to finishing, but I'll take this one off the sheet off the board. Okay, so we got two. These are two character concepts. This one looks really smudged. I'm going to have to work on it. I didn't have the right kind of pencils. You'll see. See, there's a lot of, like, if you get close, you'll see, I don't know if you can see it. There's a lot of smudging. It's because of the darkness of the pencil lead. There's a lot of things with the drawing I don't like about it. I'm sure a lot of you guys will, though. It's a neat idea. It's a neat character concept, but there's some problems with it, and a lot of it came from, I think, the kind of pencil I was using, which was more of a standard pencil. I wasn't using one of my mechanical pencils because this thing was missing, and I didn't have this yet, so I just had to use what was available. However, you can take the two drawings, and you'll notice the difference in fine detail. So the first one, you have this character, kind of a hobbit, underdark halfling, you know, hobbit halfling, they're the same thing. And it's kind of a ranger who like a ranger eldritch knight, who lives in the Underdark. He's a good guy, but he just looks evil. So you have the first one. Now look at the line work on the second one. The second one is a more recent drawing I've been doing in the last couple of days. And He has this axe that's on a pole arm. This giant axe. This guy's a giant. He's a storm giant, or at least my version of a storm giant. And he's using electrical current to make an artificial construct electrical arm to attack things with. And this is going to be coming over the top like this and cutting through a tower. This will be like the front of a castle. And a bunch of people firing spells up at him and like soldiers being knocked out of the way. And it'd be a lot of damage. But like I said, the fine detail in this drawing is a perfect example of the difference between the two kinds of art. Like, it's the same artist, obviously. You'll notice, you know, the ears and the eyes and the faces. I try to do more relaxed poses, but this one I wanted to look more like more of an action pose, obviously, than more like this one's more like a portrait. A cool slice of life moment. And this is a storm. Well, it's like a god of storm giants destroying the front of a city. So yeah, like, even if you look at my art, a lot of people go like, oh yeah, it's a lot of detail. But if you look at it, it looks more detailed than it is. I could probably, well, if I had the camera turned sideways, it'd be a little easier to show this. But all the armor designs, everything that's here, I'm not drawing things that actually exist. So there needs to be that one thing with your artwork. You have to be fine with it that it's not super realistic. I can draw portraits, I can draw realistic drawings or representations of real people or things. That's where you start your art level of skill. There's a reason why if you go to an art class in junior high or high school, they make you draw fruit. And you think, because you're a young person, that you're good enough that you don't need to learn these things. Well, how the fuck do you know? How do you know if you suck if you haven't failed? Because you haven't tried. So you're just not going to do it. Because you're too good for it. That's part of the arrogance of being young. If you want to get good at anything, you have to let go of certain arrogant notions. Like, you're the first one who's going to figure it. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll be the only person in the history of art, outside of you and Rob Liefeld, with no fucking artistic skill whatsoever, who's going to be a millionaire. Maybe. People like how terrible Rob Liefeld's artwork is, by the way. They don't like it because it's good. I think even the people that buy his shitty artwork would admit that it's not great. So yeah, it's possible for you to be extremely successful. You don't rely on that. Like, that is the most, like, fatalistic thing I've ever heard. But like I said, I wanted to show you a couple pieces of artwork and just tell you what I think. I'm not what I would consider, I'm not a professional artist, obviously. I don't do it for a living. I don't live off my art. I'm an advanced level skill hobbyist. I'm a professional level artist, but I don't do it professionally. But if you do want to do it professionally, you need to also be able to accept the simultaneous fact that you are going to have a regular job. So my advice is the same advice that Karen Strawn on YouTube. If you don't know who she is, you can always look her up. Girl Writes What. She's a Canadian MRA chick, a honey badger from Canada. I think she's from Vancouver. Or no, I don't think she's from Vancouver. But she's got the very specific kind of Jordan Peterson style accent, like a Plains accent. And she said to her daughter who told her, you know, she wants to be a physics professor or a STEM scientist. And she said, "That's great, honey. I'll encourage you to go all into that all day, every day. However, you need to learn a trade." And that's the advice I'll give you as an artist. Learn a trade. And by trade, I mean learn how to build things, learn how to fix things, because modifying and installing things, learn how to measure things and the angles and the different types of tools, and learn everything that goes into something, because the more you get into it, the more it reinforces your understanding of how buildings work, how proportion works, how perspective works, how the most minor thing of something being off level right in front of you may not strike your attention, but once you take 2 steps back, you may instantly see where you fucked up. And the whole measure twice, cut once thing. These phrases exist for a reason. They're craftsman's trade. And what you're getting into with artwork is a craft. It's a draftsmanship is what they would typically call being a line artist, like me. And every artist I've met goes, well, you're an extraordinary draftsman. And I have very little actual training outside of high school art class and taken a couple of classes in college when I was already a developed artist. But every class helps. Every class pokes a hole in some of your weaknesses. And like I said before, you have to not worry about your weaknesses. You have to be willing to accept them. And I forgot to enter that thing into the... I just realized the thing that I made, I didn't actually put in, I didn't charge on the system. Shoot. Oh well. It's a $5 tip gone down the drain. But what are you going to do? I don't care about doing it for money. I'm not here to get rich. I'm here to work on my artwork. And like I said, whatever you're interested in, if you're an artist and you're a friend of mine, I'd love to see what you're working on. I know a lot of my friends are artists, but they don't put things on Facebook. I think that might be because Facebook technically owns anything that you post, including your photographs. So I don't recommend putting things on Facebook. I do, but the things I put on Facebook are just photographs of original artwork. I don't put full scans. I have to redo my website. And that's another thing you should get. Get a website. Put up a thing on just like scraps, unfinished artwork, character concepts, and all kinds of stuff. Portraiture, landscapes, anything. Anything you want to do. In art, you can do whatever the fuck you want. No one's going to tell you what you have to do. But there are things you should do. And the things you should do is learning the basics. And I'm not going to get into that because this is like 32 minutes in. And I got to end this because my phone's running out.